everyone. Today I want to speak on a topic that challenges stereotypes, reclaims dignity, and celebrates autonomy. The power of a woman living alone without boyfriends. In a world that often equates a woman's worth with her relationship status, choosing to live alone and choosing to do so without romantic entanglements is a radical, empowering act. It's not about isolation, bitterness, or fear of intimacy. It's about sovereignty. It's about recognizing that fulfillment, peace, and strength can be self-generated. A woman living alone by choice is not lonely. She is selective. She is not lost. She is grounded. She is not lacking. She is complete. This woman owns her space. She decorates it not just with furniture, but with freedom, purpose, and the silence that nourishes creativity. She builds her routine around her goals, not someone else's demands. She builds her finances, her mindset, and her spirit with no one to answer to but herself. In her solitude, she finds her true voice, undistorted by romantic expectations. She heals. She grows. She discovers that her company is not just enough. It is divine. This kind of woman defies the pressure to settle for less, to perform for approval, or to fear being alone. She stands as proof that a life can be full of meaning, joy, without being defined by romantic companionship. Let's celebrate this power, not because it's against relationships, but because it affirms a woman's right to live life on her own terms. At the heart of a woman choosing to live alone without boyfriends lies the profound concept of self-sovereignty. This is not just about physical independence or paying one's own bills. It's about the deeper, often unspoken power of owning one's life without external validation. In a world that often conditions women to derive identity and direction from romantic relationships, self-sovereignty is a radical reclamation of power. It means waking up every day and making decisions solely based on one's own values, dreams, and priorities. There is no need to compromise one's daily routine to accommodate someone else's schedule, desires, or emotional needs. About living a life where the center of gravity is internal, not external. This is not to say that relationships are inherently restricting, but self-sovereignty ensures that any future connection is born from choice, not dependence or expectation. A self-sovereign woman defines what success, happiness, and fulfillment mean on her own terms. She may choose to work late into the night without explaining herself to anyone. She may travel solo, redecorate her home on a whim, pursue spiritual growth, or start a business, because she answers to her own vision, not someone else's timeline or preferences. Living alone without boyfriends also allows her to explore the full spectrum of her identity, beyond the roles of partner, caregiver, or lover. She can engage deeply with her interests, nurture her friendships, and commit to causes she believes in without having to dilute her focus. This cultivates a strong sense of self that is not easily shaken by societal narratives, romantic rejection, or the fear of being alone. And perhaps most importantly, self-sovereignty fosters unshakable self-trust. When a woman is alone, she becomes her own compass, her own comforter, her own motivator. She learns to navigate challenges without relying on emotional crutches. She develops a sharper intuition and a stronger voice, one that speaks from lived experience and self-reflection, not from a place of people-pleasing or dependency. In this state of sovereignty, love, when it comes, is not a rescue mission, but a complement. It's not about filling a void, but about sharing an already full life. And that is what makes it powerful. Because a woman who knows how to stand alone is never afraid to walk away from what doesn't honor her. From the moment she becomes aware of herself, a woman is bombarded with messages, subtle and overt, that suggest her value is tied to being desired, chosen, or kept by a man. Media, family expectations, religious norms, Even casual conversations often reinforce the idea that a woman's life is incomplete unless she has a romantic partner. In this context, choosing to live alone without boyfriends becomes a quiet revolution, an assertion of freedom against deeply rooted societal programming. This freedom is not just physical, it is psychological, emotional, and spiritual. When a woman steps away from the expectation to always be partnered, she begins to strip away layers of conditioning that taught her to seek approval through romantic validation. She no longer feels the pressure to conform to roles she didn't choose: the accommodating girlfriend, emotionally available partner, the endlessly nurturing figure expected to bend for another's needs. Instead, she can explore what she wants without fear of being judged as too independent, too picky, or too difficult. She begins to ask herself questions that society rarely encourages women to ask. What brings me peace? What rhythms do I enjoy? What does success look like if no one is watching? In reclaiming this freedom, she also frees herself from the anxiety of timelines. No more racing against the clock to find the one. Before a certain age, no panic around settling down, and no guilt for putting herself first. She is no longer beholden to the societal script that equates milestones, engagement, marriage, children, with worthiness. Living alone without boyfriends allows her to embrace a slower, more deliberate way of being. She doesn't have to perform femininity for the male gaze or curate a life that appears desirable to potential partners. She can wear what she wants, speak her mind, and pursue unconventional dreams without worrying whether they make her dateable. Her body, her space, and her time become hers again, not objects of negotiation, but domains of personal sovereignty. Freedom also extends to emotional clarity. Without the noise of romantic drama or the distraction of constantly seeking love, she can begin to see more clearly where her energy is most needed. She can pour into her own healing, back to her community, cultivate friendships that are rich and affirming, and discover new forms of intimacy that are not tethered to romance. Ultimately, by releasing the grip of societal pressure, she not only reclaims her narrative, she redefines what it means to live a full, meaningful life as a woman. She shows others, especially younger generations, that there is no shame in choosing solitude, no failure in prioritizing self-discovery over relationships, and no expiration date on joy. One of the most overlooked and underappreciated qualities of a woman living alone without boyfriends is her emotional strength. Kind of strength is not loud or boastful. It is quiet, steady, and deeply rooted in self-awareness. It is the ability to be present with oneself, to face life's uncertainties, joys, sorrows without relying on the constant emotional support or reassurance of a romantic partner. Emotional strength in this context means sitting with your own thoughts, your own highs and lows, and learning how to comfort yourself, hold space for your own pain, and celebrate your own victories. Many people fear solitude not because they dislike being alone, but because they are afraid of what they will hear when the world goes silent. Those internal voices, buried feelings, those old wounds. But a woman who chooses to live alone, without the emotional distraction or validation of a boyfriend, develops the courage to listen. And more than that, she develops the tools to heal. She becomes her own sanctuary. When disappointment strikes, she doesn't rush to outsource her emotions to a partner for soothing. She processes, reflects, writes, meditates, or leans into her inner resilience. She learns how to hold her own hand through grief, uncertainty, and transformation. This kind of emotional self-sufficiency is not cold or disconnected. It's actually deeply compassionate. It teaches her not to fear loneliness, to see it as a sacred teacher. In a world where women are often socialized to derive emotional identity through nurturing others or being emotionally available to a partner, living alone without romantic involvement becomes an act of emotional reclamation. She is no longer expected to perform emotional labor for someone else. She is no longer required to absorb or manage another person's moods, insecurities, or expectations. Instead, she uses that emotional energy to build a relationship with herself, a relationship rooted in honesty, acceptance, and growth. Emotional strength also translates into greater clarity when it comes to future relationships. A woman who has spent time alone, understanding her own emotional patterns, needs, and boundaries, far less likely to tolerate disrespect, confusion, or emotional inconsistency. She doesn't chase validation because she already validates herself. She doesn't stay in toxic dynamics out of fear of being alone, because she knows that solitude is not something to escape, but something she can thrive in. Moreover, emotional strength creates a powerful kind of empathy, not the kind that erases her needs to accommodate others, but the kind that allows her to connect deeply with others, while still maintaining a strong sense of self, the balance of openness and boundaries, connection and autonomy. She can be vulnerable without losing herself. She can love others without being consumed by them. This emotional resilience, built through solitude, the foundation upon which she can build a life of intentionality. It allows her to move through the world with quiet confidence, not needing to constantly explain herself or seek emotional rescue. She knows who she is, what she feels, and what she's worth. And that knowledge, that emotional clarity, becomes her compass. One of the most transformative aspects of a woman choosing to live alone without boyfriends is the abundance of space, mentally, emotionally, and physically, for creative and personal growth, free from the distractions, compromises, and emotional labor that often accompany romantic relationships. She finds herself with an open canvas. No one else's needs dictating her time or direction. She becomes the architect of her own evolution. Creativity thrives in solitude. When a woman lives alone, her environment becomes a sanctuary for ideas. Whether she writes, builds, dreams, or innovates, she is free to do so without interruption or negotiation. There is no one asking her to turn off the light, no one critiquing her pace or passions, no one pulling her attention away from the quiet spark of inspiration. She has the freedom to follow her curiosity to its full depth, without apology. This kind of solitude fosters an intimate connection with the self, is essential for true creativity. Often, when in constant company, we edit ourselves to fit into the dynamic of the relationship. We shrink certain parts, quiet certain voices, or ignore certain longings. But alone, she is free to explore her full inner landscape. Her thoughts are uncensored. Her dreams are loud. Her fears are faced head-on. In this freedom, she discovers talents she didn't know she had, passions she once suppressed, and new paths that were previously hidden under the weight of romantic compromise. Personal growth also becomes more intentional and expansive. When she is not preoccupied with managing or maintaining a relationship, she can invest deeply in self-awareness. She might take up new hobbies, return to school, start a business, travel alone, or immerse herself in books and ideas that feed her soul. She has the luxury of crafting a life not around the expectations of a partner, but around the raw truth of who she is and who she's becoming. This period of focused growth often leads to emotional breakthroughs, renewed confidence, and a deeper understanding of life's purpose. It's during this time that she may redefine success, not in terms of shared achievements with a partner, but as personal milestones, emotional healing, setting boundaries, trying something new, or simply feeling joy in her own presence. She becomes someone who doesn't just get by alone. she flourishes. Moreover, her time alone allows her to build discipline, structure, and self-motivation. Without anyone else to be accountable to, she becomes her own coach, her own motivator. She learns how to wake up for herself, to keep promises to herself, and to create meaning in the everyday moments. Builds an internal strength and consistency that many people never develop because they've always had someone else to lean on. Creative and personal growth is not always glamorous. There are moments of doubt, frustration, uncertainty. But because she is alone, she has the space to wrestle with these feelings without the fear of being judged or misunderstood. She learns to be patient with herself, to see growth as a process, not a performance. And with each breakthrough, she proves to herself that she is capable of transformation, not because someone else is watching or cheering her on, but because she is doing it for herself. Ultimately, the woman who lives alone without boyfriends is not in a stagnant waiting room for love. She is in an active, fertile ground for becoming. Her solitude is not a void but a vessel, holding the space for her deepest becoming, her wildest ideas, and her most authentic self to take shape. One of the most liberating and empowering outcomes of a woman choosing to live alone without boyfriends is the development and deepening of financial independence. In a world where women have historically been conditioned to rely on male partners for economic security, the act of living alone, managing one's own bills, budgeting, saving, investing, and thriving financially without romantic support is a bold statement of self-sufficiency. Financial independence is not merely about earning a paycheck. It's about control, about having the power to make decisions without needing permission or fearing financial consequences from a partner. When a woman lives alone and sustains her life on her own income, she affirms that she can provide for herself, her shelter, her food, her goals, and her dreams, without being tethered to someone else's resources or approval. This kind of autonomy builds profound self-confidence. She learns to make smart, informed financial choices. She becomes intimately familiar with the reality of what it takes to maintain a home, pay rent or a mortgage, handle utilities, invest in her passions, and still plan for the future. She becomes her own financial planner, protector, and provider. These skills not only make her independent, they make her resilient. Moreover, without a romantic partner influencing or interfering with her financial decisions, she is free to build wealth in ways that align with her values. She can choose to travel, pursue a degree, invest in a business, support causes she cares about, or build an emergency fund. All without having to explain, justify, or compromise. Her money becomes a tool for freedom rather than a point of negotiation in a relationship. Living alone also creates an environment where a woman becomes financially accountable to herself. She sees where every dollar goes, and in that awareness, she cultivates a deeper sense of responsibility and intentionality. This level of financial consciousness can be incredibly transformative. It encourages her to set goals, stick to a budget, and dream bigger than survival. She begins to thrive. It's important to acknowledge that financial independence also helps break harmful relationship cycles. Many women stay in unhealthy or even dangerous relationships simply because they lack the economic means to leave. But a woman who knows she can take care of herself, who has her own bank account, her own credit, her own name on the lease, she is far less likely to tolerate disrespect or dependency. She can walk away from what doesn't serve her because she doesn't fear being left without a safety net. She is the safety net. Additionally, financial independence fosters a deeper relationship with self-worth. As she earns and manages her own money, she experiences the direct link between her efforts and her quality of life. This reinforces a sense of empowerment. I am capable, I am resourceful, I am enough. There is a quiet pride in paying one's own bills, furnishing one's own home, and having a life built not through shared finances, but through self-determination. Also allows her to model strength and independence for others, whether it's younger women, peers, or even family members, proving that a woman does not need to marry a partner to access stability or success. She redefines what wealth means, not just in dollars, but in freedom, options, peace of mind, and self-respect. Financial independence is not the absence of challenges. It often means making sacrifices, working long hours, or confronting fears about the future alone. But it is through these very trials that she builds endurance, sharpens her instincts, and develops a sense of control over her destiny that cannot be bought, gifted, or borrowed, must be earned. And once it is, it changes everything. When a woman lives alone without boyfriends, one of the most profound and often underappreciated developments she experiences is the cultivation of healthy boundaries. Boundaries are more than just rules or limits. They are the framework through which we define how others can engage with us, how we protect our energy, and how we preserve our peace. For a woman who chooses solitude over romantic entanglements, the process of learning, enforcing, and honoring her boundaries becomes not just a skill, but a lifestyle. In many romantic relationships, especially those that are rushed, codependent, or rooted in societal expectations rather than genuine connection, women are often encouraged, directly or indirectly, to blur their boundaries. They are taught to be available, accommodating, emotionally accessible, self-sacrificing. They may feel pressure to make themselves smaller, quieter, or more agreeable in order to maintain peace or avoid rejection. Over time, this erodes self-respect and leads to internal conflict. But when a woman lives alone and removes herself from these dynamics, she has the sacred opportunity to rebuild her internal boundaries from the ground up. She begins to discover what she truly wants in her interactions, not what she's been told to want, not what a partner demands, but what actually aligns with her emotional, mental, and physical well-being. She starts to differentiate between what energizes her and what drains her. She learns to listen more closely to her intuition when something feels off. Living alone gives her the uninterrupted space to practice saying no, and realizing that nothing collapses when she does. She starts to understand that no is not rejection, coldness, or selfishness. It is a declaration of self-worth. Whether it's declining an invitation, refusing a favor that feels like an obligation, or avoiding people who cross her boundaries, she becomes fluent in protecting herself without guilt. And the more she practices this, the stronger and more self-assured she becomes. This independence also allows her to become more discerning. Without the noise of a romantic partner's opinions, emotions, or expectations clouding her judgment, she learns how to recognize red flags early. Whether in friendships, family dynamics, work environments, or potential romantic interests, she no longer tolerates passive aggression, manipulation, or emotional unavailability, because she knows what it took to cultivate her inner peace, and she is unwilling to give that up for the sake of temporary affection or validation. Her solitude teaches her that boundaries are not walls, they are doors. They don't keep love out. They ensure that the right kind of love can come in, and that the wrong kind cannot linger. Because she no longer feels desperate to be in a relationship, she doesn't compromise out of fear of being alone. She is alone by choice, not by circumstance, and that choice becomes the foundation of her strength. Importantly, healthy boundaries also allow her to preserve her time and energy for what truly matters. She becomes selective, not out of arrogance, but out of respect for herself. She values her peace, her goals, her passions, and the people who honor her limits. Every interaction becomes intentional rather than automatic, and this leads to deeper, more authentic connections, whether romantic or platonic. Furthermore, by living this way, she becomes a role model for others, especially women who have struggled with people pleasing or boundary violations in past relationships. Her life is a living testament that it's not only possible to live with dignity and autonomy, it's powerful. She teaches others, not by lecture, but by example, that boundaries are the ultimate form of self-love. They are not a sign of being closed off, but a sign that she knows her worth and refuses to settle for anything that disrupts her well-being. As she continues on her journey, her boundaries evolve with her. They are no longer rigid defenses, but flexible, conscious choices. She knows that protecting herself is not a reaction to pain, but a proactive act of love. Living alone, she becomes both her own guardian and her own sanctuary. Firm in her limits, open in her heart, and deeply grounded in her sense of self. Perhaps one of the most enriching and transformative gifts that a woman receives from living alone without boyfriends is the opportunity for authentic self-discovery. In a society that often encourages women to define themselves in relation to others as daughters, girlfriends, wives, mothers, the act of choosing solitude is a quiet but radical declaration. I will define myself for myself. Kind of self-discovery isn't the glossy, curated journey that social media likes to portray. It's not always candlelit journaling or scenic solo vacations, although those moments may exist. Also sitting with your own silence and realizing you have a voice that hasn't been heard in years. It's discovering likes, their opinions, and beliefs that aren't filtered through someone else's preferences or judgments. Peeling back the layers of identity you've inherited, absorbed, or performed, and asking, who am I when no one is watching? Without the influence or expectations of a boyfriend, a woman begins to explore her inner world with curiosity and honesty. She no longer feels the need to adjust her behavior, appearance, or opinions to gain approval or maintain harmony in a relationship. Absence of performance creates space for truth. She begins to uncover her true values, not the ones she was told to believe, but the ones that resonate in her bones. She questions what success, happiness, love, and purpose mean on her own terms. This journey is often non-linear and deeply personal. She may revisit childhood dreams that were abandoned in favor of practicality or partnership. She may stumble upon passions that light her up in ways she never expected. She might come face to face with her shadows, the parts of herself that she previously buried in the noise of romantic distractions, and begin to heal them with compassion rather than shame. Living alone offers her the sacred privilege of unfiltered introspection. Her time, space, and energy are directed inward, allowing her to tune into her intuition, observe her emotional patterns, and build a stronger, more honest relationship with herself. Without the constant presence of a romantic partner, she can make mistakes without fear of judgment, evolve without permission, and change direction without needing anyone's validation. Kind of self-discovery is not about isolation, but about integration. The more she learns about herself, the more she realizes how complex, nuanced, and powerful she is. She begins to integrate the many facets of her identity, her strength and her softness, her ambition and her rest, her joy and her grief. She gives herself permission to be whole, not just palatable. And as she continues this journey, she also begins to discern what kind of people, spaces, and experiences nourish her. She becomes more intentional with her friendships, her time, her words, and her goals. She stops settling for anything that requires her to abandon or shrink herself. She no longer feels the pressure to mold her identity to fit someone else's idea of who she should be. She becomes the author of her story, not a supporting character in someone else's narrative. Authentic self-discovery also fosters a sense of spiritual grounding. Whether through meditation, creativity, faith, nature, or simple presence, she begins to feel connected to something larger than herself. She realizes that she is not alone in her solitude. She is deeply connected to her own soul, and through that, to the world around her. Her self-worth is no longer rooted in how lovable she appears, but in how deeply she knows, accepts, and loves herself. Ultimately, this path of self-discovery becomes her foundation. It informs how she moves through the world, how she relates to others, and how she chooses to love, if and when she does again. But unlike before, any future relationship will not be a search for completion. It will be a meeting between two whole people. Because now, she knows who she is, and more importantly, she is no longer afraid to be her. One of the most empowering and life-altering aspects of a woman living alone without boyfriends is her full and unrestricted freedom of choice. Freedom touches every aspect of her life. What she does with her time, how she spends her energy, where she goes, what she prioritizes, and most significantly, who she becomes. Unlike societal norms that often expect women to tailor their decisions around romantic relationships, this woman builds her life solely on her own values, desires, and goals. Freedom of choice means waking up every day and making decisions that are entirely her own. She chooses her schedule. She decides how she wants to rest, work, socialize, or isolate. There's no pressure to compromise on where to eat, what to watch, how late to stay out, or what routines to follow. These seemingly small decisions compound into a life of autonomy, a life in which she feels sovereign over her body, her space, her time, and her destiny. Kind of freedom is rare, especially in cultures where a woman's worth is still closely tied to her relationship status. But when a woman lives alone, she breaks out of that narrative. She shows the world that a woman is not waiting to be chosen. She is the one doing the choosing. And that choice is grounded not in fear or loneliness, but in clarity and power. She has the freedom to say yes to new experiences without needing to consider how a partner will feel. She can take a job across the country, travel on a whim, pursue a dream that takes all her focus, or completely change her lifestyle without negotiation or guilt. Her decisions are not diluted by someone else's fears, insecurities, or ambitions. Instead, they are driven by her own evolving understanding of what brings her fulfillment. This freedom also creates a space where she learns to trust herself deeply. Every choice she makes, whether it turns out perfectly or not, teaches her something. She learns through trial and error what aligns with her truth. And because she's not constantly seeking validation from a romantic partner, she builds a strong internal compass. Her decisions begin to reflect not just what is logical or expected, but what feels right to her. Furthermore, the freedom of choice extends into her emotional world. She is not bound by the emotional roller coaster of someone else's moods, expectations, or reactions. She decides who gets access to her energy, what kind of relationship she allows into her life, and what behaviors she is willing to tolerate. If something doesn't sit well with her, be it a friendship, a work environment, or a social obligation, she has the freedom to walk away without drama or apology. Autonomy also protects her from settling. When women are conditioned to believe that being partnered is the ultimate goal, they often stay in relationships that are unfulfilling or even unhealthy simply because they fear the alternative. But a woman who lives alone and thrives in her solitude knows the alternative intimately. And she knows it is not a punishment, but a privilege. She will not choose a relationship out of desperation, obligation, or societal pressure. She will only choose it if it adds genuine value to her already whole life. Importantly, freedom of choice also means she can redefine what love and partnership mean to her. If she ever decides to engage in a romantic relationship again, it will be from a place of abundance, not lack. She won't be looking for someone to rescue, complete, or validate her. Instead, she will choose a partner who respects her individuality, supports her dreams, and celebrates her independence. But whether she makes that choice or not, she is already complete. Her freedom becomes a quiet, powerful rebellion, a statement that her life does not need to follow a template. She has every right to shape her future not around romance, but around intention. Whether she dreams of running a company, living off the grid, writing a book, or building a life filled with solitude and simple joy, she gets to choose. And in a world that often tries to choose for women, that freedom is nothing short of revolutionary. In a world that often equates a woman's worth with her relationship status, choosing to live alone, intentionally, joyfully, and without romantic entanglements, is an act of quiet revolution. It is not loneliness, it is liberation. It is not isolation, it is expansion. It is the courageous decision to center your own life, your own dreams, your own healing, and your own voice. The power of a woman living alone without boyfriends lies not in her rejection of love, in her refusal to settle for anything less than what honors her truth. She is not waiting to be chosen. She has already chosen herself. And from that place of fullness, she becomes unstoppable. She becomes a mirror for other women, symbol of possibility, and a reminder that a woman alone is not incomplete. She is whole, radiant, and fiercely alive. So here's to the women who walk alone, not because they must, but because they can. And in doing so, remind the world that solitude is not the absence of love. It is the presence of self. Thank you.